I want to talk about clear thinking. Clear thinking allows us to access our best state of mind when dealing with situations in life. When we come across a problem in life or something that's difficult, all of the oxygen in our body flows to our limbic system, our emotional center, to help us deal with that situation. God designed the body to do that, to keep us alive. But when we need to solve a problem or think critically about something, it's really hard when we don't have access to our frontal lobe because all of our oxygen is busy keeping our body alive. Advances in understanding the brain are catching up to many principles that we already have in the scripture. I want to cover just a few parts of the brain to help you understand what happens inside. Right across from our ears on both sides is what's called the amygdala. The amygdala is where we have fight, fright, flight, delight, and freeze. As the mother of 4 boys, I'm really thankful for the amygdala. It's why you'll bust out laughing at a joke, or why when you put your hand on the stove, you don't stop and say, "Oh, this is hot. If I don't remove my hand, I'll probably damage my skin." No, you immediately withdraw your hand without even conscious thought. If you're walking along a trail and all of a sudden you see a snake, you freeze. The next part of the brain I want to cover is the hippocampus. It runs right alongside, can't see it on that side, of the amygdala. And think of big school of memories. As you're standing on that trail, looking at that snake, you start to access your hippocampus and ask yourself everything that you know about snakes. Are you supposed to stop, drop, and roll? Run? Be still? A couple interesting things. One about the amygdala. When you live in a constant state of chaos, you can actually live with a swollen amygdala. Some of the kids in the neighborhoods where we live, or even the adults, have swollen amygdalas because they're constantly scanning for danger. The interesting thing about the hippocampus is that it doesn't always tell us the truth. If you doubt me, ask 3 kids from the same family about a situation and see if all their stories match up exactly. The big school of memories isn't so much that it lies to you, but that it only has a limited perspective, so it may not have all of the facts. As you continue to stand on that trail, and you realize that snake is not moving, your breathing slows down, your mind is engaged more, and all of a sudden you realize it's just a stick. But the point is, the amygdala engaged and kept you alive. When you're in a trauma situation, you get stuck in low road thinking. So if you can see, the amygdala is right at the top of the brainstem. And God put it that way so that you don't have to think about pulling your hand off of a hot stove. The amygdala sees the danger, shoots it down your spinal cord, and your hand moves. Your amygdala sits right at the top of your brain stem, so that when you touch that hot stove, oxygen is pushed down in your spinal cord and your hand is removed. But it also means you don't have full access to your brain, and we call this low road thinking. The fastest processing thing in our brain is called the occipital lobe. It's opposite of our eyes, and it allows us to picture things very quickly. The occipital lobe is why right now you could picture being on the beach. If you close your eyes, you could feel the sun on your face, or hear the seagulls, or feel the breeze, or switch quickly to the mountains, or maybe the mountains where there's snow, or you can smell the pine trees. Or maybe it's grandma's or a friend's house where you can smell the favorite thing that she would bake. The occipital lobe allows us to picture being somewhere else in an instant, which helps us to become present. When we begin going up the brain like this, the oxygen starts flowing up. And for that to happen, we literally need to breathe. That's why in a traumatic situation, you'll have someone say, "Take slow, deep breaths." We've been saying that for years, but now we understand what's happening. Literally, oxygen is flowing through the brain. Across the entire center of the brain, there's a left and right hemisphere. It's called the cingulate cortex. When we can get oxygen all the way to the cingulate cortex, we start to experience balance. The cingulate cortex helps to balance our thoughts and our emotions. As our oxygen continues to flow up our brain instead of down our spinal cord, we can actually access logic that's at the top of our head. The ultimate goal, of course, is to get oxygen all the way into our frontal lobes. Our frontal lobes really do have 2 sides. When people say that the left side of the brain controls the right side of the body, right side of the brain controls the left side of the body, so only left-handed people are in their right minds, it's kind of true. The frontal lobe is where creativity and problem solving happens. You can see how important it is that when a crisis happens, once we know we're safe, is to breathe, think about what we know, help ourselves be present, balance our thoughts and emotions, use our logic, and keep breathing so that we can get to our creativity and problem solving. The most important question I learned in all of my clear thinking training is the question, God, what? Romans 8:28 says that, and we know that in all things, God uses everything to the good of those who love him. When it says to rejoice in trials, and it says we have the mind of Christ, and to ask God for wisdom, all of those principles have always been true. Science of the brain is just now catching up. God tells us to take every thought captive to the obedience of Christ. Understanding brain science actually gives us tools to do that. When God says, be still and know that I'm God, it's not a suggestion, it's a command. Being still allows us to breathe, it allows us to relax, it allows us to access the mind of Christ. What are some things I can expect when I'm in my best state of mind? If helpful, close your eyes while I read this list. I'm creative, I can be curious, I'm competent, I can be generous, I'm grateful, peaceful, I'm content in any situation. I can see the big picture in 3D, see color and movement. I'm much more patient. I have well-being. I have strength. I have logic, reasoning, and I can articulate. I'm a better listener. I see possible options. I understand my values, and I have compassion. And I have the capacity to see God at work. Credits for this video. My certification comes from the Clear Thinking Counseling Alliance. You can find it at www.clearthinkingalliance.com. The 4-step thinking sequence is from the Peck Protocol, developed by David Peck and David Puris. The brain image was adapted from A Colorful Introduction to the Anatomy of the Human Brain, a brain and psychology coloring book by John P.I. Pinnell with Maggie Edwards, page 123.